it's me, Queen KB. Welcome to another edition of the Royal Council. With me this week, as per usual, Baron Botch, Lord Lewis, Sir Mitch, and Noble Natalie. This week we're going to be going after the topic that has been plaguing Twitter and the whole internet wrestling community since basically the first one we saw at WrestleMania, and that is the cinematic matches. And we know how Mitch feels about these cinematic matches. There have been a number of them, both WWE and AEW, and the good, the bad, the indifferent. And go ahead, Botch, you're just losing it already. Why don't you start with
Mitch's reaction to this is everything right now. I knew exactly how he would react when the topic was discussed. I kind of shuddered because we were going to discuss it, but I thought, why not? So so I've already written an article more or less about it on the site. You can check it out if you want to. I'll put a link in the description. But
I'm currently writing a rebuttal too, so
yeah, there is a rebuttal coming. It's actually sitting in the drafts, just waiting to be finished up. But here's my thing. First of all, I completely understand, to be fair, why people don't like them. I understand that wrestling fans are wrestling fans. Heaven knows I've been a wrestling fan since I was 7 years old. I get it. I remember watching wrestling in the territories, watching straight wrestling matches with straight storylines and that sort of thing. My whole thing is we are in an absolutely unprecedented time right now. We're dealing with a pandemic. And unfortunately, as a result of said pandemic, WWE, AEW, really any promotion at this point, if they're even still operating, and so few of them are, they're just beginning to start back up again. But they've had very little choice but to come up with novel ways to do things, if only to, first of all, to keep moving, and then secondly, to do their level best to distract us, the fans, from the nonsense that's going on around us. So they've been trying to do different things, and they've come up with a lot of interesting ideas, some really bad ones. Natalie has mentioned that she didn't exactly love the Bray Wyatt things, and I get it. I completely get it. In fact, like I said, I mean, I get the dislike for all of it. I just think entertainment is entertainment, and I'm okay as long as you entertain me. I found the Boneyard match to be entertaining. I thought the Stadium Stampede was an absolute riot. I laughed until I cried. It was just so well done. I love matches. I love straight wrestling as much as anybody. I love a good story in the ring as much as anyone else, but I'm okay if you entertain me. Just, if you're going to do it, just don't do it badly. That's all I ask.
Look, I mean, my big problem with cinematic matches is we all know it's a predetermined simulated conflict, shall we say. We all know that. But during the actual matches, we suspend disbelief and we believe briefly, and we believe that whoever comes out of this is going to be the better man or better woman, right? With cinematic matches, that goes out the window because it's not in the ring. It's for all the world to see. It's not anything like a simulated conflict. It's like, I don't know how to describe it. For me, it just kills the concept of in-ring storytelling. It just completely kills it. And and people think I'm being alarmist here, but I genuinely worry that even when the pandemic's over, that this is all we're going to get from now on is these cinematic matches, instead of, they're going to get rid of the traditional, 4 posts and all that, and just do these cinematic matches forever. And that happens, pro wrestling as we know it's dead. And I don't want that to happen, so Sammy.
But there's only been 6 of them total.
I would also disagree that I think when things go back to normal, they won't do these matches, mainly because you've got fans coming in. They're not going to want to watch the whole show on the screen. What's the point of turning up? And if you look before the pandemic, unless I'm forgetting any, the only one that comes to mind was Randy Orton versus Bray Wyatt. You rarely got cinematic matches, so I don't think it will take over. But I think for now, while there's no fans, they're playing with things to get that engagement from fans at home. So I can understand why they're doing it. But for me, there are matches, if you can call them matches, that
You can't really.
aren't they're not entertaining. They're not fun, in my opinion. I just think they're stupid.
And that's the thing too. You're actually in cinema. You have ambitions to be a filmmaker, and if you're saying that this isn't your cup of tea, I mean that really says something.
Yeah,
He
I
is
mean,
a filmmaker.
He has films right now, and by the way,
Yes.
I've seen one of them, and it's really good. Like he has
Only
a
one?
real. What was the first one that I saw about the chip that's implanted in the woman?
Aiden.
Thank you. The thing is brilliant. The storytelling is really, really good. So we know.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah.
And yeah, my issue is I have nothing against cinematic matches as long as they feel like matches. So like the Stadium Stampede match, for example, I loved it because even though it was over the top and it was cinematic, it still felt like a match, and it was entertaining because there was still a clear winner and a clear loser. Even if you got Adam Page on a horse running after Sammy Guevara, even though there's these crazy things in it, it was still felt like a match, and it was
so
entertaining.
good.
Oh, I love the Stampede match.
I was in
See, I
tears.
thought the Boneyard match felt like a match too.
Me
I thought
too.
it absolutely felt like a match because for me it did. Because of the fact that we had a solid winner and so forth at the end, compared to the other night, the swamp match, where we have no idea where they're going with this. And while it was a great story, I have to agree with Lewis, it wasn't much of a match.
And to put it as your last thing to show on the pay-per-view, I think is insulting. Like, this is your headline match, and it's not even a match. Like,
I'll give you that all day.
I find
But
that
I thought
insulting.
it was so well executed that it didn't take away that it was a main event, because I thought it was really well executed, especially compared to Bray Wyatt's previous debacle at WrestleMania.
That thing was
Oh,
terrible.
that was awful.
So
Yeah,
Natalie, how
Natalie
did you? I've got to ask Natalie, because we've never really asked her. Like, Natalie, like, what did you dislike about that match involving Bray and Cena? What was it that you didn't like? Name all the things you didn't like about that match.
It was too just disjointed. It went from one thing to the other, and there was no cohesiveness. It was nothing like a match. It wasn't even a story behind it.
Mm-hmm.
So you
was a
couldn't
Star
even,
Wars
to me,
sequel
it wasn't
trilogy.
even cinematic. It was just a bunch of different little things mishmashed together. Yeah, I talk with my hands, but I'm not French.
No, I do.
And everything was just mishmashed together. It was awful. It was hard on the eyes. It was hard to watch. You couldn't figure out where it was going. I have no idea who won, what even really happened. I mean, I could sit down and watch it again, and I could watch it a half a dozen times or even a dozen times. I would never figure that out.
It's the Star Wars sequel trilogy of matches.
I feel like it's one of those things you might need to be under the influence to maybe enjoy. Like, watching it sober and alert, you just no idea what is going on.
I need some
Maybe
like
that's
bad
why Queen
salsa
wanted it.
meow meow to enjoy it. Yeah.
I was gonna say, I think even stoned it wouldn't be entertaining. It might make sense while stoned. I'll give him that.
And Queen would know.
But beyond that, and heck, I'll watch it stoned and see what happens. Yes, I have my medical card.
Yeah, it's medical. It's all medical, guys.
No judgment here, Queen.
It really is. But beyond that, I mean, I can't. Well, maybe it'll make sense, and I will try it. I can't say it was well executed.
Not at all.
No, not it, because it will. Okay, so maybe this will help a bit. It was meant to show Natalie. It was meant to show John Cena through his many gimmicks. That's kind of what it was doing, and then it also did the same thing with Bray Wyatt. So there really
Well, it
was
didn't
no
work.
way to keep. Go ahead, Natalie. I'm sorry.
It didn't work. There was no cohesiveness in it at all. If you hadn't told me, I would never have figured it out.
Well, see, that's the thing. It's like in order to watch that match, you kind of had to have been a fan the whole time in order to get any of it. Still, even at that, to your point, it still felt very jagged because they just bounced from thing to thing. And I mean, felt like I was getting the bends trying to keep up with it. It was not easy to watch. And I'm kind of with you in the sense that it wouldn't matter how many times I watched it. Parts of it would still elude me, and the flow was just an absolute disaster. And apparently, from what I understand about what was happening backstage, both Bray and John were throwing out ideas that were just kind of summarily rejected out of hand in order to kind of try to get things over with, and they ended up with this very jagged product that I'm sure drove Lewis nuts as a storyteller, and it drove me nuts too because I couldn't follow it. It was just a bit of a hot mess, honestly. So I agree with you that it wasn't.
I mean, Bray Wyatt's version of the cinematic matches. Have any of you guys seen the TV series Legion?
I haven't.
Never have, no.
I'm not sure.
It's this really trippy comic book show in the X-Men universe, and it's very trippy.
Oh,
and
sorry.
it's
Yes,
very,
I've seen the first series. Yeah, sorry.
and it's
Maybe I
very
have.
all over the place at times, but there's still, and it's very weird, very trippy. There's still cohesiveness to it. There's still, there's still some sort of element of structure, of plot structure, and with Bray's stuff, there isn't. I mean, even with Matt Hardy originated these things back in TNA Impact, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
And I didn't like those matches either.
You didn't really?
No, I didn't like them either.
I thought both of those would have been okay with you because of how
No,
good they were.
I just
hate them as well.
I just don't like the cinematic aspect of them, mate. So sue me.
You just don't
But
like them,
at
period.
least
Okay.
at least with those, there was a structure to them. There was something.
There
to it.
was, yeah, because
Yeah,
Rebby
there
wrote them.
There was
Rebby
a
wrote them
beginning.
from beginning to end.
Even though things were all over the place and there was some random weirdness going on,
Of course, there
was a beginning, middle, and end.
True, I agree.
With Bray Wyatt stuff, there isn't. And continuing with Matt Hardy, the Stadium Stampede match, if it went for the Matt Hardy, switching gimmicks in the pool and that drone, it probably wouldn't have even been considered a cinematic match, really, because everything else was just like a well orchestrated multi-camera street fight. It was more like an expanded boiler room brawl, if you say.
So good.
I mean, I'd argue the Adam Page horse scene was quite over the top and ridiculous.
Oh yeah, of course.
Oh yeah, it was, but I wouldn't quite call that cinematic either. Like I said, that
I
match.
wouldn't either. Yeah.
That match would have been more like the old boiler room brawl between Undertaker and Mick Foley in SummerSlam '96, I think, just expanded.
Yeah,
like,
I agree with that.
Yeah, but
it wasn't like a weed high nightmare like a Bray Wyatt match is. I mean, it made sense, and it existed in its time as opposed to being kind of suspended in kind of like an animation style existence that made no sense.
But
I kind of agree with you in that sense.
The Money in the Bank ladder match was very much a cinematic match in parts.
I was going to say that is my argument to my own point.
Very much a match.
I mean,
that match I could tolerate. Let's just say there were some things in that were pretty silly, like Corbin throwing Ray off the roof. That was just plain stupid. But
I was thinking of Dana sliding like Titus O'Neil.
I forgot about that.
I thought the bit where she got the Money in the Bank briefcase and then Stephanie turns up.
I loved it.
Oh, it was so funny.
I did too. Yeah. Or when they were
so stupid but so funny.
Yeah, agreed. I mean, it had it, but to Mitch's point earlier, like this is a match that had a beginning and a middle and an end. Even if it was a little jagged in there, it still had a beginning and a middle and an end, and it all made sense. I really enjoyed that, but what Mitch isn't enjoying are the ones that are kind of like more fantasy style. Fantasy is just not Mitch's thing.
Was both fantasy Boneyard was both fantasy and had a beginning, middle, and end, in my opinion.
See,
I think it did too. I agree with you.
my issue with the Boneyard match, while I've come round to it a bit more than when I first saw it, because I was just so shocked by like what is going on with it, is the moments that didn't feel believable, like when AJ had Undertaker in the grave, and then he got onto the tractor thing, and then all of a sudden Undertaker was behind him. And it's like that sort of stuff. I was like, it's a bit ridiculous.
It was the other Undertaker. That could happen.
Right.
I get the point of it, but I didn't like it. Like that, the match itself was a lot of fun, and watching it again when they showed it on SmackDown, I got more of the fun sense of the enjoyment of the match, like when they were fighting, and then it had the droids that was a bit ridiculous, and I was like, okay, it's getting a bit silly now, and then it got a bit okay again, and then the end bit just felt a little bit over the top, but compared to the Bray Wyatt match, if you could even, I don't want to call it a match, the swamp fight, that just felt like, if that was a promo, like it made me think a bit like the Rock and Stone Cold with the whole belt into the river and stuff, like they're building up to something. It didn't feel like it should be the last thing on the show as a way to round out the night. It felt more like it's building up to a match between the two of them.
You kind of wonder, like, because I get the sense that because none of us are thrilled that it didn't have an obvious outcome. It's on a wrestling program, but it has no obvious outcome. Figure that one out for me. But I get the feeling that we'll probably hear more about it tomorrow night after you see this. Maybe it'll make more sense.
Well, there's that, but there's also when I think we're all expecting, or most of us are expecting to see that at SummerSlam, it will be probably The Fiend versus Braun. And that will, I mean, yeah, it's basically suspending your disbelief over the course of a month because of one screwy, I'll call it a segment, a movie, or not a match. Yeah, and I think it goes back to that slow build that we many of us love, and the fact that this was just one chunk of that small build, that slow build. And I think Lewis is right that having it on the end of the show made it feel a little weird. So maybe if it had been in the middle, and then you could have put Asuka and Sasha as the main event, because that was the match of the night. And I'll stop talking about non-cinematic matches.
It was, though, you're right. And I remember at the very end of the DD, Natalie was like, so, like, we didn't know what to do with ourselves. We were just kind of like lost, because the end of the, I guess it was the end. The end of the recording shows up, and there's this copyright notice in the lower right-hand corner, like there always is, and then nothing. And it's like, what do I do with myself now? Like, it just left you here as opposed to dropping you off at the bottom where you're supposed to be. It just, so I agree with Lewis too. Like, I don't think it should have been at the end.
Yeah. And I didn't like the ending. I'd like to know what happened to Braun.
It didn't have any.
Oh, he drowned.
Yes, but this isn't the first time
he's drowned. I
was rooting for if there was going to be a real match, which there was.
Well, we've seen Bray Wyatt go drowned before in Matt Hardy's pond. So there was that match too, which we haven't mentioned.
To be fair, like, the reason that I'm okay with Bray doing ridiculous matches is because the character in and of itself is ridiculous. There's nothing remotely what's the word I want? Nothing remotely grounded in reality about either incarnation or any of the three incarnations of Bray Wyatt. All of them are fantasy based. I mean, yes, okay, Bray Wyatt started out as kind of being Walmart Waylon Mercy, but he took on something complete. It's literally the first thing I thought. But, and man, I wish that character could have gone on, because it was so much fun. He was just too old to do it, though, bless his heart. But
yeah, I agree.
He was already 41 or 42, something like that. But at any rate, and very injured. But R.I.P. Dan Spivey's career at that point. But at any rate, Bray has always been a fantasy character, and so you can't, even with like a straight match where you've got like an arena full of people in the ring and you're having a match, there can't be, because of that character, you can't just have a straight wrestling match. There has to be some fantasy element to it. It's kind of always got to be. And so
Well,
that
Taker
heavy-
matches early on were the same way, especially at
True.
pay-per-views with the lightning and all of that. So, I mean,
Yeah.
he is following in Taker's footsteps in some regards and Foley's footsteps in some regards.
Oh,
Yeah,
sure.
I would argue.
I think we're confusing theatrics done to sell a match and theatrics within a match, though.
Yes,
but
there's
Bray Wyatt is both.
But we also forget the fact that we've moved on from these big, over-the-top, ridiculous characters, and we've moved into a more realm of realistic people. You know, that they've all got real names, most of them.
which is
You know,
an issue I have had for 10 years personally.
and
Dude, we had
while
Mantar.
who?
We
I've
had
had it the past
Mantar.
10,
Mantar was
20
a
years.
thing. Giant Gonzalez was a thing.
Yes,
the
but that was-
gobbledygooker was a thing. Like,
course,
what were they
back then.
thinking?
Santa Claus.
It was ridiculous.
Paul's Mahoney in a Santa Claus outfit.
Oh God, yeah.
Does anybody really look on that era with fond eyes, Botch? Come on.
No.
There were some good moments, but that was
No,
mainly the top.
I'll give you
card.
that all day long. Like sitting there for 5 minutes waiting for the gobbledygooker to hatch. Poor Guerrero having to sit in an egg. Like it's like, this is my career going. I can only imagine that must have been what he was thinking. But yeah, I mean, that was no, to answer your question, Mitch. I do not look upon that era fondly. There's a hole in my knowledge and it's like right there.
Yeah.
And I don't,
Yet
I'm not
Undertaker,
trying to fill it.
Undertaker debuted on the same pay-per-view, so who knows?
Right.
But the thing is with Bray is, while he is a lot like Undertaker in that sense, he's still, other than the puppetry and stuff, which you could argue, you know, it's him making these characters up behind the scenes up until the points when they're shown, you know, in the match with Bray, with Braun, which you're a bit like, what, who, like, maybe there's other people with Bray, if you're thinking realistic. Like, he is still, if you're outside of the cinematic stupidness, quite a real character. He's not mystical. He's schizophrenic.
The way
But
he no sells is pretty mystical. Yeah, I mean, that whole thing with the first thing I was thinking of when you said that was the match that he had with Seth Rollins in the cage, where he no sold just about everything under the sun. Yeah, that was pretty. That was pretty mystical. I enjoyed it. I had no problem with it.
Oh, I hated that.
I wasn't super keen on that either, especially the way that they did it so they could build up to the ending where, you know, Seth, you know, nearly killed him with the sledgehammer shot, and they stopped the match. I'm thinking, you're stopping a Hell in a Cell match? When does that ever happen?
Mm-hmm.
Like, you're breaking your own rules that are thin enough already just to sell, you know, this character. I mean,
yes, but this is not picking on booking show. This is discussing the theatrics, and it seems like Bray is following in that vein.
Yeah, but
with the no selling.
Yeah, but theatrics to sell a match or to sell a character. Cinematic matches don't really do either, in my opinion. They're just random bits of things that's supposed to entertain, and a lot of times they don't entertain. But me, at least, you know. I mean, Undertaker turning the lights off and appearing to say, you know, I'm challenging you for WrestleMania. That's theatrics to sell a match. Bray Wyatt coming out with lights out with all the screaming in the background while he's putting the mandible claw on somebody. That's theatrics to sell a match. True. Theatrics within the match is what I have issue with.
But
it's just not his thing. I understand that.
I get it. But the thing, just to the swamp match.
We don't even know what to call it. That much of a mess.
Leave her alone.
It's not a match. It really did move the storyline forward, which every true match does.
Yeah, I'd say yes and no, but it felt like a promo, and that's the thing. Like, yes, it put the story forward, and there were things that I did not like in there, like with the Alexa Bliss thing. While it was hilarious, it was ridiculous.
Bliss.
I kind of
and
like
then-
that. I got to be honest.
and
I know
the,
I understand why you didn't, but I kind of like
and
it.
the Brave Wyatt twin thing. Like, I mean, maybe that was just in a vision or whatever. I want
I
to
think
believe.
it was, yeah.
Like that stuff aside, it just felt like a promo to build this feud up rather than a defining moment in this story, like feud between them told in matches. It just felt like a B movie mixed with a promo.
I think you
know-
may be right, though. I think there's going to be more on SmackDown tomorrow night.
I mean,
Me too.
yeah. I mean,
I
I'm
think they're
hoping, I'm praying at SummerSlam they actually have a match.
They'll probably keep telling the story, I would imagine, because it didn't. And Natalie agrees
Yeah.
with us too. Like it didn't feel like the end of anything. So
Yeah,
and
'cause
I don't think it
I
was
get-
supposed to.
And
I get the idea
I want
that-
a match. I want a real match.
I get the
I wanna see
idea
this
that
thing.
It's Bray Wyatt. You're never going to get one.
I
Yeah,
get the
right.
idea
I really would
that
love to see
He's gonna
Braun
run
beat him.
around the ring and knock people over. It's what
But
he
I-
does.
but I get the
Alexa
idea that
Bliss
they
thing
want
in the swap match. The Alexa Bliss thing in the swap match. That felt like a poor homage to Friday the 13th Part 2. I mean,
Oh, I thought it was brilliant with the history that Braun Strowman has with Bliss.
I
Yeah.
laugh.
I
I
thought it
laugh.
was
But
fantastic because she is completely the opposite of what you think Sister Abigail would look like. Because we all picture.
that's not. I don't think that's Sister Abigail.
I don't.
I
Either.
know it's not, but I'm just saying she's almost the complete opposite of what we imagine Sister Abigail to be.
I
And so,
get all that.
what?
I get all that, but to me, it just felt like a bad homage to Friday the 13th Part 2. Because if anyone's
Yeah,
seen
but
that
not
movie,
everybody
with
has
the-
seen the Friday the 13th movies.
well,
I do not watch horror movies.
Exactly.
in this
Yeah.
in this one, the final girl finds Jason's mother's mummified head in her clothes, and she puts on her clothes to pretend to be Jason's mother to fool Jason into not killing her, and then when his back's
That's like
turned,
Psycho, though.
he kills him. So
Oh, yeah, that was a lot of movies. It wasn't just that one.
Yeah, that
That's
was
a
an
good
homage of something
tool.
else. Even
And the
that.
thing is,
That's
it
not
was-
where that
it was-
started, but
It
yeah.
felt like lazy writing as well, because I know it's a horror show, so they're putting the horror tropes in. But it was like the
right.
bit where Bray just stares into the water, and you're like, well, obviously, Braun stares into the water, and he's like, well, obviously, Bray's going to come out, and the
another Friday the 13th.
the horror story, the horror trope where the villain isn't actually dead, and they come back and then they take them out, sort of thing. Like it felt like a lot of lazy writing with it as well. Like, oh,
The only thing
this
that,
is a great horror trope. Let's stick that in there.
the only thing that was missing from that match was Bray Wyatt coming out with Freddy Krueger's head in his hands, like in Freddy versus Jason. I mean,
Thing is, the Friday the 13th movies are homages to other things too. It is what it is.
It's true. It's true. They are. Nothing in Friday the 13th is particularly original. Most of that stuff comes
Right.
from Psycho.
And I think
well,
we're
nothing
just
slasher flicks are original. Everybody's been ripping off Hitchcock for 50 years. 60
Oh, of
years.
course. Yeah, yeah,
There's
yeah. We know
seven
that.
There's
plotlines
only
in the world, blah,
There's
blah,
only
blah.
8 original films. Yeah.
And one of
I
them is glitter. Shut up,
I
Ed.
think we have beaten up this topic about as much as we can this week. Bye, Mitch.
Sorry, Mitch.
But I'd love to know what
Um,
the listeners think. I'd love, if they can comment, see if they agree or disagree with us.
Yeah,
Oh,
please. You've got to
absolutely.
at the bottom of the YouTube comments. Like, tell us kind of what your thoughts are. You obviously know what ours are, but let us know what your thoughts are on the bottom, and we will absolutely respond. We're very
Yeah.
interested to kind of get a sense of like how everybody else feels about these matches. Are they just entertainment to you, or are you sick to death of them already? Would you rather have straight wrestling matches? So I know I'd be interested to hear your thoughts. I know we all would be as well. So
Oh, absolutely. What else do you got to say about YouTube, Botch? Go for it.
oh, right. So Dre, who is not here because he's a loser at life, Dre and I started. I'm kidding, sort of. Dre and I
Working,
started.
guys. Poor Schmo has to work for a living. Poor
No,
bugger.
he does. He's literally on the road working. I'm just being difficult. I'm kidding. But no, for real. He and I started another video cast / podcast called The Front. It goes with my other website, vinylalbumcovers.com, if you're curious. and it's basically a music podcast. And for the first episode, and actually for the first 4, because we wouldn't shut up, our first episode is all talking about the top 10 R&B groups of the 90s. So it was a really fun podcast. We had a great time doing it. And the first one's half an hour. We'll kind of keep them relatively short, and we had lots of fun doing it, and hope you'll enjoy watching it too. So I'll put a link in the description so you can go check it out.
And Lewis, what are you here to push this week? Or
Well, I mean, it'll already be finished, but I just want to push the fact that the reason Botch is so bitter about Dre is currently that score. You know, John Cena versus Pineapple Pete, currently getting
I'm a little
absolutely
bitter too.
destroyed.
Molly walked.
and
I was rooting for Pete too.
So was I.
I'm the original I Hate Cena guy. So you know.
I'm shocked. And Mitch, what are you here this week to push?
Well, yeah, it sounds like we're pushing everything but WR at the minute. But guys, I have a new podcast coming. It's co-hosted by Stephen Dickey of Wow Women of Wrestling, and it's called, wait for it, I'll just get out of the way so you can see it, Storytelling in Spandex. It is a great new podcast coming out. Hopefully, it will be available next week on Spotify and on Podbean, and hopefully iTunes as well. It's going to be a great new podcast about, obviously, the world of comic book related media, but also pro wrestling as well, and how they both intersect. Because, as we both know, it's just a bunch of sweaty men and attractive women pretending to fight, wearing tight, colourful outfits that even, circus performers will blush at. So, hence Storytelling in Spandex, available next week.
But he hates cinematic matches.
Exactly.
There's a difference between watching a comic book movie and watching a pro wrestling match, for crying out loud.
On that note,
I had to.
One's fantasy. The other one's meant to be a simulated.
Mitch's bit.
Mitch, I'm going to get the hook. On that note, please subscribe, like the video, and click on that little bell down there so you get the yeah, it's down there.
So you get to know the next video coming. When it comes, you'll get a notification right away that it's there, because YouTube's algorithms are terrible.
Yeah. And on that note, we have Baron Botch, Lord Lewis, Noble Natalie, Sir Mitch. I am Queen KB. We are here for Wrestle Royalty, and we will see you next week. Bye.